Well, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak today, and thank you for the kind words as well, Dave. As Dave mentioned, I'm blessed with 7 great customers in the Montgomery, Saratoga County area. And today I'm going to talk, this is my perspective on the last 21 years of trimming. And I don't believe that I would be where I'm at today if it wasn't for the customers that I have allowing me to develop with new techniques and trial and error on how we can change, how we can change our trimming techniques. Because we have, as farms grow, trimming techniques need to change as well. So a couple things that I think is very important before we even start talking about trimming is communication on the farm with I always say, who's the most important person to better hoof health? Everyone on the farm, whether it be the owner, the herdsman, the guy pushing cows, everybody plays a part in for better hoof health, and that's what we're here for. And especially one of the most important people we should listen to is the cow. They're trying to tell us things all the time. We just have to listen to what they're saying. So, and I think that's, with that said, that means I like to be part of the team. When I show up at the farm, I want to be part of the team. Every day I go to work, I love my job, and every day I go to work, I enjoy going to every place I go. So with that said, record keeping in order to improve hoof health is very important. I have a hoof supervisor that I keep track of all the cows that I do, and I'm able to monitor each farm and see the strengths and weaknesses. There's been a recent study shown that 25% of all the cows on the farm have lesions or lameness. I'm running right now between 5 and 15% on my farms. So, and every year I try to even reduce it even more, and which we've done over the past, I would say, even 5 years. So this, I try to change with the times, and there's new techniques comes out, not so much products, but more just being more micromanage, if you will. So there are many different styles of trimming. I was taught the Dutch method. There's the Kansas method, the white line method, and I'm not here to say which one's better or worse, but we all tend to develop our own techniques. But ultimately, it's what's best for the cow. I've used every technique on the same cow at one before. So I don't want to get into like saying, oh, the Dutch is better than Kansas, and that's it. Basically, what's important is that when at the end of the trim, the cow is balanced. There's a lot of cow there for a little bit of foot. So balance is very important, and how we achieve that is, how whatever technique your trimmer decides to use. So how do we reduce lameness? One of the first ways is we need to provide optimal cow comfort. So I'll get into more about cow comfort later, but as far as the feed go, I'll go back to 25% of lesions and lameness. 50 to 60% of that 25% is digital dermatitis. And that's what my records have shown, and other records of people that I've talked to and seen their charts. Warts, I'll call them warts. Warts are, I compare them to like a person that has high blood pressure. It's kind of a silent killer, but can be managed. So how do we manage warts? Well, there's a lot of different ways, but what's important is that we just go back to the record keeping and know that we have an issue, and try to take care of it. Warts, like foot baths are meant to prevent warts, not treat them. So if you have a lot of warts, running the foot bath, you're already too late. I'll get more into foot baths in a minute. But so if we can reduce warts, we can reduce lameness throughout the whole herd. That's very important. Where do warts generally start? It starts in the heifers. Once they get that virus, if you will, or they can carry it into their whole life. So we try to manage the heifers first. And I've seen where that has worked. If we can get rid of the warts, lower the warts in the heifer facility, it really shows in the cow facility. So I think it's important that people assess their heifers and see where they're, what they're, if they have a wart issue there. In order to have a good wart program, hygiene is huge. So if you have a lower leg hygiene issue where they're always dirty, you can run your foot bath all day long and it's not going to do anything. It's not going to be as effective. So you've got to make sure you keep your barns clean, you keep the cow's lower legs clean, the whole cow for that matter. So how do we reduce warts? Well, one of the reasons, or one of the ways, is foot baths. So what product do you use in your foot bath? There are many different products. They all, as far as I'm concerned, work. I was at one farm, the guy he asked me, what's your favorite foot bath product? And I said, it's called Use It. I don't care if it's zinc, copper, combination of the two. I'm not a big fan of formaldehyde, but some farms use it, but they all work. You just have to use them properly. Foot bath size, I like to see at least 2 dunks per foot, depending on where your foot bath is. If you need a high flow traffic, some farms I have, they go multiple cows can go through the foot bath at once. Other farms, 1 cow at one time. So depending on that foot bath size, it varies amongst, depending on the farm. Foot bath location is also huge. You want to keep cow flow going to and from the parlor, because that obviously will promote back to the barn, back to feed, back to water, back to lying down quicker. So you want cow flow is huge when it comes to hoof health. And you want to also make it, so the foot bath, you want to make cow and user friendly, because you don't want the guy carrying the 50-pound bags of zinc or copper a long ways away, because he's probably not going to run it like he should. So you try to make it as user and cow friendly as possible. The one thing I want to go, foot baths in the heifer facility, if you happen to run them, and I've seen this numerous times, be real careful if you have your foot bath where the water is, because that's a good place in heifer facilities to put it. If you leave that foot bath in, there's a couple things that could happen. One, the heifer that has warts, the shoe just won't go drink. The ones that don't, they think that water feels good on their legs. They will actually stand there and drink, and that product will dry their skin out so much from just standing there over a long period of time. I've seen it where it peels the skin right off the heifer's leg. So be real careful about that. Usually just if you have to, run them through, and just run them through a couple times and get rid of the foot bath. That's my recommendation. Or block it off some way, but you don't want to block off that water, because there's a lot of places I see that's where they put their foot bath in the heifer facility. So if we can reduce the warts, your percentage of lameness will go down drastically. And and also, not just because you've gotten rid of the warts, but it also provides for a better balanced foot as well. So, and without, if an unbalanced foot, so many other things can can happen, whether it be sole ulcers, white lines, heel erosion is an issue, foot rot is one of the biggest things. If a cow, if a cow gets infected in that area, she can, from the wart, I've seen that too. And another thing about foot rot, if you see any swelling, don't wait for us as hoof trimmers to diagnose her. Just give her something to prevent where it's so bad that nothing will help her. So let's see here. So when should we trim? Well, I think it's important to be on a schedule and consistency, and don't necessarily go by what the cow looks like. I think everybody that I go to has from Dairy Comp, they have a hoof trim list, and we go off that, because she might look good on top, but maybe not on the bottom. Might just need a little modeling or balance. So I think going off a list is very, very important. And then anytime there's a sign of incident, then you definitely want a trimmer, which is real. I don't know how many of you are familiar with locomotion scoring, but that's very important to me. I see a lot of cows that are 2s and 3s. I very seldom see a 4 or 5, because they've gotten her to me before she got that bad. 4 and 5s are very hard to treat and cure. So, teach everybody on the farm locomotion scoring, and especially the cow pusher, because they don't want the cow pushers. They don't want lame cows either. They want them. They hate trying to get a lame cow up out of the stall. She's slow getting to the parlor, slow getting back. So I think, educate the guy that's pushing cows is important. And every time, I try to, when I'm at places, talk to them, and if I see a cow that's lame, I'll always say, who is that? And just about, most of the farms I go to, she's already on the list. So, but I always still like to double check. So any questions so far, or on some of the things I've talked about, or I don't know how we can tell that, Dave, if there are any, but. So how do we increase?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Dave.
All right. So, hey, I got a couple of quick questions. So you use a record keeping system that's right on your hoof trimming table.
Correct.
Right. So you've got all the records for those cows. So for people whose trimmer doesn't have that kind of a system, what do you suggest they do as far as how they keep their records? I mean,
well, I think
always just some kind of a paper system is okay. If they've got Dairy Comp, I guess they could enter the data in Dairy Comp.
That's a great question, Dave. And there's a couple different ways you can do the paper. Have a paper trail, or keep it the paper, but also somewhere in the office have a whiteboard. Perhaps the data trim, how many cows you trimmed, how many blocks, how many wraps. That could give you a pretty good indication of your completion percentage, and you can monitor that throughout the year to see, okay, because they're through the hoof supervisor system. I see higher, I see lameness going up in the hotter months towards August. I see them going up, digital dermatitis going up in January and February, because you just can't run a foot bath a lot of times. So that either Dairy Comp will just tell you have to look up each individual cow. So I would recommend getting a whiteboard and keep or some sort of system on your computer where you could keep track of how many cows you trimmed, how many blocks, how many wraps. That's a pretty good indicator of what's going on.
But also, it's valuable, isn't it, to be able to have the data on those individual cows. So when you see a cow, it's nice to know if you saw this cow 6 months ago or 3 months ago, or what her history was, right?
Oh, yes, very much so, especially if a cow has, you know, a leg issue. I'll know, I won't remember the last time I looked at her a month ago or 2 months ago. I won't remember, but my computer will. So that's very important. Also, another quick way of seeing where your cows are at is you could even look at the bill. Whoever writes the bill out, if you see it, all of a sudden one time you average 3-4 reps a visit, and then all of a sudden you're at 20, which I just talked to a friend of mine who trims recently, and he said that's a lot of warts. And so whoever's the owner or whoever's making up, they can look at the bill as well and see, kind of get an idea where they're at.
The trends and what's going on, yeah. Hey, so I got a couple of questions coming in from participants. So first one is, if foot baths are preventative, what do you treat warts with?
I'll either use like a liquid hoof zinc copper mix, and that's all I'll use. And a lot of times I'll make a paste. I might not even wrap them, depending on the severity of it.
Okay. All right, another question that came in. In your experience, what is the most common cause of sole ulcers and white line abscesses?
Okay, so sole ulcers, I would say not being out of balance, especially in that usually on the outside claw, the lateral claw is where you see most of your sole ulcers. And preventive trimming should reduce sole ulcers. White line, and these are all you're always going to have some, but if you have a high incident of white line lesions, chances are, I firmly believe it's from the cow walking and there's some sort of concussion. So are your grooves too deep? Is your alleyway slippery where they're constantly causing concussion to the outside of the foot? Or the white line is actually the softest part of the foot. So it could be some sort of incident has happened, whether it be concussion, or I see a lot of times stones, the little tiny stones can get up in that white line area because that's the softest part of the foot. And once they get in there, they just keep going higher. So I always see some, well, not some, but okay. So it's a small percentage, but this one farm, I don't even have a sole ulcer on there, but I have 5 white line lesions so far this year. So that's my opinion on those 2 lesions.
So here's a question I have, and I'm sure you've got some thoughts on it. So if a farm does not have wart issues with their heifers, and it's probably very few farms that don't once they start moving manure around and equipment and everything else. But if they do not have warts in their heifers, what are the things that a farm can do to be proactive and kind of preventative to minimize the risk of the warts kind of taking hold in the heifers?
Well, I would have to say cleanliness in the alleys, because usually they're the last ones to get clean, but make sure your alleys are clean. Keep the lower leg hygiene as clean as possible. I think that's important. And okay. The stalls, the stalls, make sure the stalls are clean, cleanliness.
Okay. All right. Couple more. Now they're starting to come in here pretty quick.
Oh, that's good. I like questions because then
all right, another question. Any advice for a sore foot that looks good but is still bothering the cow? Wow, that's pretty hard.
Well, there's a couple different things. One, it could be her leg. 2, it could be the start of a double sole. Which I don't know how many you've all seen them where there's like a layer of pus between the corium and her hoof that when you open it up, it's like gushes out of there. They're very painful from that. The way that I try to assess that, and they're outside. Well, they're not in my truck. One of the most important tools that I have is my hoof tester. It's just it's a fancy, it's a set of channel locks, if you will. I check the sensitivity. If a cow is showing any signs of lameness, I always check her foot to see, one, if it's her foot. If I can't tell, it kind of takes the guesswork out of whether it's her foot or her leg. I also, before I block a cow, I always check the good claw to make sure that cow can withstand all the weight on one claw.
It basically squeezes it. It tells
Yes.
you kind of where the sensitive area is.
Yes, it does. And
Yeah.
she'll let you know. So
Yeah. But I mean, that kind of question, it's almost like you got to get the cow, you got to see her, you got to get her on the table, you got to examine her to really tell.
yes, and they're I get them from Animart, which is now Armor Health, but they're only like $15, and I use them all the time. So, no, good questions. Any other questions right now, Dave? Or?
No, I don't think so right now. No.
Okay. So how do we increase cow comfort? You know, there's so many little things that can help. One, I think, is to be very consistent, and that would be with your hoof trimming program, your foot bath, and your feeding. I think feeding plays a big part in hoof health, because the best thing for that cow is to increase lying time. The longer she can lie down, the better. So how do we increase lying time? One is to make sure that when she comes back from the parlor, there's always fresh feed in front of her, or pushed up feed. I'm a big guy on keeping feed pushed up, because once again, if a cow's working to sort and get the feed, reaching for feed, that puts a lot of pressure on her feet as well. And I hate to see cows just working that hard just so they can eat. So I think that's important with feeding. It was funny because just about 3 weeks ago, I was at a farm and I'm walking up the alleyway, and there was a group of cows on one side and a group of cows on the other on the feed alley. And they just came back from the parlor, and the one side had been fed and the other side wasn't. The other side is just going to wait there as long as they can, or they're going to go lay down and get back up. But it was funny because I'm the one side that I walked down through there, and the cows that were eating never even looked up. All the other probably 150 cows looked to the right where I was standing and like, well, let's go. I'm hungry. So it's important that you just have feed in front of them at all times. You know, I know you have to clean up and there's going to be a small window where there's nothing, but I know a lot of farms try to do that when they're in the parlor, or, you know, so I think that get them off their feet, let them get something to eat, let them go lay down. So I think that's important. I think it's also important that if there's any way in return alleys from the parlor to wherever they're going, to give them more access to water so that they can stop and get a drink and go eat. Because if you know, obviously the more water, the better. Because there's not a lot of waters in your groups. Just the more cows that can drink after the parlor, the better for me, because I think that will promote lying time as well. Your stalls, that's another big. There's no set design or numbers that I can give you as far as what the length should be, the height, because every farm has different size cows. So you really have to assess each farm and your cows and your groups individually. So, but some things to look for, like your neck rail. I'm sure a lot of this you've already heard. The neck rail, is it real shiny in the front? Should it be? One farm I was at, we talked about moving the neck rail forward because it was awful shiny and you could see the cows. were hitting it, and it wasn't, they're having trouble laying down. But then we realized, looked a little harder, and it was right in front of us, and obvious, like there was too much sand in the stall in the front. So reduce the amount of sand, that lowered the raise the neck rail, if you will. And it made a huge difference just by eliminating that sand. So I think stalls are important as far as making sure they're nice and flat, nice sand in them, or whatever you use. If you don't have that issue if you use rubber, or the cow beds, but because they're always flat. So I think stalls are awful important. In cow flow to and from the parlor, and try to do it in an efficient manner. One farm I worked with recently, they were, so they could take the cows, and they was taking a long time to get them back to feed because they were cleaning both alleys, the feed side and the stall side. So we did set up some gates, so now they can clean and get the cows back to the one side and still be able to clean the other side. And we timed it, and that saved 20 minutes of milking. So that's an hour more that she's not standing there a day waiting to get back to home, if you will. So I think that's important. Let me see what else I have here. As far as what hoof trimming equipment, I think, they're all, whether it be a stand-up or layover. I have an Appleton stand-up. I like it, but I'm not going to say it's the best. They all have their pluses and minuses, whether you have a stand-up or a layover. They all have their pluses and minuses, so I'm not going to say one's better than the other. But like I said, everybody has different ideas on equipment and but it's all based on the guy behind using them. So, any questions on any of that other stuff, Dave?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. No questions have come through, but it made me think about things. Talk about lying time. So tell me your experience. I think I know the answer, but I guess I want to hear what your thoughts are. So farms that have pens basically really overcrowded, 30-40% over stalls, versus farms that are maybe 1 cow per stall or maybe 5%. Do you see those impacts or the differences from the standpoint of hoof health, where cows are basically forced to stand more because there are not available stalls for her to lay down?
I would have to say nothing stands out to me in that respect.
Oh, okay. I'm surprised.
Possibly,
all right.
Maybe I don't. As far as the hoof goes, I guess if I had to say where I'd see it most, which I don't know the farm that well, I would have to guess that perhaps where you see the biggest problem is in the milk tank in production. I think your production can slip from being that overcrowded more so than it affecting the hoof health, because I guess I don't have any. So with that said, when I was referring to lying time, I was not just for the cow's hoof, but also for, I think, milk production.
Oh yeah. Rick Grant at Miner has certainly done a great job documenting that and doing all the research on lying time. How about farms that have rubber on the floors versus farms that are, just concrete? Even assuming that the floors are in good shape, they're grooved well, they're not slippery, versus farms that have rubber. You see any difference there?
No, yeah, I do see a lot of difference. Not so much. I know it's better for them. I know they like it, but the one farm I go to, they put a strip of rubber on the return alley, And you can go and you can watch a lot of cows. They'll come right out of the parlor and they'll hit that rubber and they'll walk right up through there, and they tend to want to walk on that. So I think there's it's only on half of the alley, so you can tell that they like it. Some don't care. Some will walk right up depending, but so rubber
I see the same thing. And when I have producers ask me that are considering putting rubber in an alley, I always tell them, if you're going to put rubber in the feed alley, don't just put it where the cows stand. You might as well put it in the whole alley, because if you just put it where they stand, other cows coming out are going to be pushing those cows as they exit the parlor in an attempt to walk on the rubber and stay off of the concrete. And I've seen that many, many times over the years. So, hey, here's a question that actually came in here. The question is, I know you talked about it briefly, but could you go into detail on telling the difference in hoof problems versus leg problems? Any tricks to tell that on the farm, or wait until the trimmer can put her on the table?
Well, I guess one thing I would first look at is, swelling. That's one. And a lot of times if a cow, when she walks, if you can see her ankle going like, that's usually a hoof issue. You can almost hear it a lot of times popping, but I guess about the only way to tell is swelling, especially around the coronary band, which is where the hair meets the hoof. If you see any swelling or redness there, that's really the only way. The only other way is to pick her up and squeeze her foot, or look at her foot. Because once again, I'll go back to those hoof testers. I used them yesterday on a cow that was lame, and once again, it was her leg, her foot. It wasn't her foot, and I would not have known that if it wasn't for, because a lot of times I've trimmed a foot and it looks perfect, but I don't know, she was lame when I got her, but the bottom of the foot looks great, and then the smallest speck can be, you can't, almost to the naked eye, you can't see it, but when you squeeze that claw, there's something going on in there. So you have to investigate even more, because you don't want to start digging her out or looking for something when it's her leg, because then you just made her lame or worse.
Right, but that tester she'll react, you can tell. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yep.
There's another one. These questions seem to come in bunches here. So here's another one. This one here, beef cows on pasture. Tricks on keeping claws getting too long. Some all of a sudden get long toes. Never had that before. It's weird.
I would say possibly because if it's a wetter environment, they might grow a little faster. There's a wear versus growth rate. I don't know if they changed their diet in any way. They're getting a lot more grain. That tends to make cows' feet grow faster. I've seen that, and that's another thing. If I've seen in the past, I'm going back. I've seen cows give their heifers or cow refusals, and you want to talk about feet growing fast? They grew fast. So I'm not a big fan of that. But as far as you said it was a beef cows on pasture?
Yes, that's what it says. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. You probably have to trim them. They would have to be trimmed just like any other cow.
Maybe that situation there was the quality of the pasture maybe was really good compared to what they've experienced in the past. Perhaps I'm just speculating. And
long toes can be uncomfortable for cows, so you definitely want to keep them trimmed, because once again, when they start growing, they'll start walking like that, and it's no different than us if we started just try to walk with your toes in the air. There's discomfort.
Yeah. So here's not so much not a question, but a comment. It said, in response to Dave's asking about overcrowding and hoof health, Mr. Biche is correct in saying it will show up in the tank, but it will take its toll on her entire frame. just like us if we are standing every day on concrete, just my opinion.
Oh, no, I completely agree with them. I just don't have any hard data to prove that this group that's overcrowded, I see more lameness in. I guess that was more my point.
Yeah, yep, okay.
But yeah, so the more you can promote blood flow through the foot, and that's, and if you, then, and it's better when they're lying than standing there. Because one thing you will see with overcrowding is a lot of perching, or a lot of cows standing with their front feet in the stall while another cow's laying there, which can promote a lot of other things, smashed teat ends, leg injuries on the other cows. But yeah, I guess I misspoke when I said that I don't have any facts that says, okay, these cows have more soil ulcers or more hemorrhaging from being overcrowded than another group.
Here's the beef people, I think, are, anyway, I guess I'll just read what it says. In general, in your experience, would hoof trimmers be willing to work on beef animals, or do they strictly work with dairy?
No, I believe that there are guys out there that do, because I look at the world of hoof trimming a lot, and there are guys that I see them with beef animals in their shoots, and they say they're going to do beef. No, beef animals do get trimmed, and I only deal with dairy. That's just not that I wouldn't do beef. I don't have time.
Yeah, you're fully employed doing the dairies that you got. Yeah. Okay, I guess I'd say take it away again. We're on a break for questions. They tend to come in groups, it seems.
No, that's good. I enjoy the questions, and I apologize for not being the best speaker. I just this is my first time doing something like this, and I really don't have much more other than trying to be part of it. When you're at the farm, try to be part of the team and try to be communicate as much as you can with everyone. How can we make things better? And because I really think that, especially in the future, you're going to see more and more welfare audits being done by milk producers, or who knows who else will be doing them. So I think it's important to try to reduce lameness as much as possible. So and like I said, most of my farms, if we're at 12%, next year I want to be 10%. How can we make it better? So
it used to be in the past. People had laminitis, foot problems. It was always blamed on nutrition. But we've learned over the years that that's not the case so much, although I guess it certainly can be. What are your thoughts from a standpoint of not enough fiber in the diet, or a ration that's kind of too hot causing laminitis problems? Do you see that very often? I mean, you've got some really well-managed herds that have good nutritionists working with them, so you may not really see that, but any thoughts? Or
well, I'll be the first one to stick up for the nutritionists anywhere I go and not blame them. I think there's and I know that in the past that has been an issue. The nutritionists, he's blowing their feet off, blah, blah, blah. No, I think it's more a complete balance with nutrition and hoof health. Keep her as healthy and as you can, so no, I don't really think it's like a high incident of, because that's another thing with if you're going to go with that route, the nutrition route, all 4 feet would be, in my opinion, she'd be lame on all 4 feet, not just one. And generally they're just lame on one for the most part.
Okay, Charles,
if that makes sense.
I'm going to put your email address in the chat box to everyone.
Yep.
If people have some follow-up questions.
That's fine.
And you know what? I failed. All right, I think they got it. I failed to mention, you said, oh, I'm not too good as a speaker. You're fine. You did a great job. I know you have gone down to SUNY Cobleskill and spoke to some of the classes down there. I know this is a little different than that. But anyway, yeah, you did fine. Hey, and here's a comment from an attendee. It says, Charles, please know that your presentation is excellent and having you share your experience is valuable. Thank you. So
Very nice. Thank you.
So anyway, that's a nice comment, I guess I'd say.
Yes.
Okay.
I just hope it wasn't my wife that put it on there.
Well, it says anonymous attendee, so I don't know, maybe it
Probably
was.
her.
Is she online? Maybe it is.
I don't know. I was just kidding.
Anyway, so, all right. Well,
All right.
I think our timing is perfect here.
All right. Well, I
So,
appreciate. I'd just like to say, Dave, I appreciate the opportunity to talk about all of this, and you know, thank you for asking me.
Well, thank you. We certainly appreciate your input. I know you've got a great reputation out there, and I know your customers appreciate the work that you do. And when you rattle off some of the numbers from a standpoint of what we see in the industry and what your numbers are showing on your herds, it certainly seems to show some excellent work and some really good results.
Well, with that said, I would just like to say that's not all me. They're just as responsible for getting better numbers or getting good numbers as I am. So.
Well, like you say, it's a team effort. Everybody's kind of has to kind of do their part all the way around from a standpoint of cleanliness and cow comfort and everything, records and a routine, and everybody pulling in the same direction. And that's when you see the good positive results. So super.
All right.
All right. Thank you very, very much. And we're going to take a little break here now. Take the time to take a look at the slideshow that we have. All of our sponsors here have contributed, which has basically allowed us to put this on for you folks at no charge. And we certainly appreciate that. And please take note of that and support our sponsors. And we'll start up again basically at 1:45. All right, thank you.
Hey Dave, how are you?
Oh, good. There he is. There he is. Good.
Here I am.
How long have you been connected?
Like 3 minutes.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, you missed a great presentation by a really well-respected hoof trimmer in the Mohawk Valley area. I guess you probably caught a little bit of the last of it there. So
Yeah, but that's unfortunate. Yeah, I would really love to be able to attend these whole events. They are always very interesting. It's a competition with other events in life.
yes, right. Well, okay. So about 1:44, 1:45, we'll get you on. We'll get your presentation up, and we'll go from there. I know this is maybe a little different topic. I know you were excited to talk about this because it's almost a little bit of a consumer issue from a standpoint of how long cows last, and people have trouble. It's one of the big reasons that cows get culled is repro. So how do we get these quote older cows pregnant and keep them productive and healthy in the herd? So we'll be back with you in just a moment.
Very good.
Dave, are you there?
Yes.
I'm gonna take off, but thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I know you did some trimming next door to where you're located this morning, and you probably got more to do this afternoon.
No, I'm done, but so.
Okay.
But thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Chuck. Have a
Yeah,
good
bye.
Okay, everybody hear me? All right, we're ready to go here. Julio, can you hear me?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, this is what everyone's been waiting for.
No pressure, no pressure today.
For most people, you've been around long enough, you hardly really need an introduction, but you've been at Cornell now for how many years?
It's about 8 years now.
Wow, time flies. It doesn't seem like it's that long. Done a tremendous amount of research, some really great work on repro. There is no one that I know that's more excited about getting cows pregnant than you. I can tell you that. So you are the perfect person for this talk and for this type of work. So I'm going to just turn it right over to you and give us some ideas of what we can do to get these older cows pregnant.
Okay, excellent, Dave. Thanks a lot, first of all, for having me, for inviting me to be part of the event. I remember very well the previous times I participated in person, very, very nice place. You know, we always had a lot of fun interaction with the audience. You know, hopefully we can do something like that today through the virtual format. But thanks a lot again for having me, and thanks a lot for those of you that are attending the talk. And I really look forward to interact with you at the end. Just to make sure, Dave, can you please confirm that you can hear me well, you see my screen, and you see my laser pointer?
Yes, yes, we can hear you. I can see your laser pointer, see the screen. We're good to go 100% here. So
okay.
Yes, we're missing out on the fancy lunch with the shrimp salad and the dessert table and all that kind of stuff. But hey, next year.
Next year, sure. Excellent. Actually, I got my first dose of the vaccine today since I'm teaching in person. So I should be safe even soon. But anyway, so let's get talking about how to get these old cows pregnant. And I have to admit that, so this is a very interesting topic, but I have to admit that it's the first time that I'm giving this talk, and Dave, in a way, he made me think about this a little bit more that I tend to think about it. And I have to go back to my chest of data and thoughts and kind of bring together some of the things that I think that could help commercial farms. But first, you know, just very briefly touch on, you know, what are the implications of getting pregnant and timing of pregnancy during lactation for these older cows. And just for the purposes of making things clear, we'll be talking for the most part about cows that are in more than one lactation. So lactation greater than one, which in many cases I call multiparous cows. So same terminology, always talking about a cow that is past her first lactation. And then we're going to talk about what are some of the reasons why these older cows have, or you know, explain why they have lower reproductive performance overall. And more importantly, we're going to talk about some of the things that farms could attempt to do in order to improve the performance of these subgroups of cows on farms, which it's very important. And like Dave said, it's becoming more and more relevant to keep these cows longer in our herds. And I want to make the argument, which I'm sure nobody will disagree with this, that timely pregnancy during lactation, it's almost like insurance for our cows to stay in the herd. And you know, we observe on farms multiple associations between repro performance and herd survivability. So, and we do know that older cows that get pregnant later in lactation, they are a lot more likely to leave the farm. So not even talk about the ones that don't get pregnant, just the difference in timing of pregnancy during lactation has an impact, has an effect on the likelihood of cows leaving. And this can be seen very clearly on this graph that my former student, Matias Estangaferro, now with Dairy Health and Management Services, share with me. Just focus on the yellow line and the green line going up. That's basically the chances or the proportion of cows that leave the farm and the association with days in milk. So the later a cow gets pregnant in lactation, even if she gets pregnant, the greater the chance that she will end up leaving the farm. We have seen similar type of behavior for cows in herds in studies that we have done. And it's very clear that it's even more relevant in older cows than in younger cows. So very quickly, so these are survival curves for time to calving. So when cows left the farm over an 18-month period after calving. And the two lines that we see on top here are for first lactation cows, for which starting to breed them at different days in milk and getting them pregnant slightly later in lactation didn't make a big difference. So for those ones, it doesn't make a big difference if we delay pregnancy to some extent. But look at the older cows. So the lines start splitting, and the cows that we started breeding later, in this particular study, the cows that we started breeding later at 88 days, they also got pregnant later on average during lactation. They had a much greater rate of calling through lactation, in particular, as these cows kept going through the end of the first lactation and then the lactation that we follow them for. So very simple, older cows or multiparous cows that are bred later, and in particular, so we start breeding them later and they do not get pregnant. So they are open later in lactation. They are more likely to leave the farm, and the likelihood of leaving the farm increases as these cows are later and later in lactation. So that's out of the question. Everybody knows that, no surprise. So the other thing that we know, and it's very clear, is that age or older age is negatively associated with reproductive performance. And unfortunately, it's not a single thing. So it's not just one factor. There's not a single driver that explains the decline in reproductive performance as cows age. So they have reduced expression of estrus. So it's a little harder to find cows showing estrus. And as we'll discuss later, they also have weaker estrus events than younger cows. Then if we are able to breed them, if we put semen on them, we have fewer cows that will get fertilization, fewer cows that will have early embryos. And even for those cows that are pregnant early on, and we detect them, we detect those pregnancies, we pre-check them for the first time, and we are all happy at 30, 40, 45 days after breeding. We also have a lot more of those cows that are going to lose those pregnancies. So by the way, this little bubble that you see here with this mass inside, that's an embryo. That's a 32-day embryo. So a lot of these embryos that we see early on, they end up dying. So we have an increased rate of pregnancy loss in these cows. Again, so it's a combination of things. There is not a single factor that explains this decline. And then if you start thinking a little bit further, so what are some of the biological and management factors that influences those outcomes that we just talked about? The ability of cows to show estrus, their fertility, and their ability to maintain a pregnancy. And once again, we have many. And I even covered this picture, the idea is to tell you it's a mess, right? So we have so many factors that drive reproductive success that the whole situation, it's quite complex. And even though we understand quite a bit and we spend tons of time doing research and trying to figure things out, there are a lot of things that we still do not fully understand. But when you think about it, an older dairy cow, among the factors that drive the decline, so you're going to have that they have been exposed for longer and more frequently than a younger cow to the factors, to the multiple things that impact fertility. So they have had more calvings in their lifetime, and the associated issues with calving events, in particular health issues in early lactation. And health can have very, very direct effects on reproductive performance and some indirect longer-term effects that are a little bit harder to tease out, but they're also out there. oxidative stress due to the high metabolic rate as they produce a lot of milk. It's something that research has shown that has an impact. And then we just have the fact that these older cows make more milk, and that's fantastic. And that's what we want, right? That as cows mature, they keep making more milk. However, for reproduction, we have an antagonism between milk production and hormone metabolism that we're going to be talking about. And this has direct implications for the ability of cows to get pregnant. And last but not least, and of course, there are many other things to think about or that have been shown to affect the fertility of cows, they have a larger uterus. Just the fact that they have gone through multiple calvings with, calves that are larger and larger at every calving, then we also have the effect of a larger uterus. So we have several factors, and just very briefly, again, going back to the life cycle of the cow and the fact that the more times she goes through this cycle of calvings and lactations and new pregnancies, dry offs and calving again, she's at a greater risk of developing health disorders in early lactation. And we know really well that health problems, health issues early in lactation are associated with reduced reproductive performance, with percentage of cows pregnant at first insemination, with the ability of cows to express estrus, and with overall reproductive performance. And by no means I'm going to revise all this data. I mean, it's tons of data, it's boring. The point is that we know really well about this negative interaction, and it makes sense, right? And every farmer understands this really well. So this negative interaction between health events in early lactation and reproductive performance. And the other interesting thing and relevant factor here is that these health effects carry over through the entire lactation. So here you have survival curves. Basically, just simply, we use these curves to see how fast cows are getting pregnant in lactations. As you can see here, these are days open in the x-axis. And the blue cows are the cows that had no health issues in early lactation. So this is a commercial farm. I just coded, all the health events, and I just ran the survival curves to get the spread rates for cows that did not have, so the blue cows, and the red cows, the red line for cows that did have at least one health event in early lactation. So, it's obvious. These lines are pretty far from each other, as you can see, and relatively early on, they spread apart and they stay apart through lactation. What does this mean? Cows with health problems became pregnant at a slower rate during lactation. And on average, there was a 46-day difference between the cows with or without a health disorder. As you can see here, 112 versus 158 days, median days to pregnancy. And, this is, again, something that is well recognized. So the thing is that these are things that happen early on in lactation. They are still affecting the ability of our cows to become pregnant through the entire lactation. And then this is relevant not only because of the effect that delaying pregnancy can have in one lactation, but even throughout subsequent lactations and the lifetime of the cow. And I like to simplify this with this picture, okay, where I just show the example of two cows, one that gets pregnant early on in lactation when she's still making a lot of milk, versus the other cow that gets pregnant late in lactation. She's making less milk. She's going to have a much longer lactation. She most likely will gain too much body condition. We want to dry this cow off, over condition. And then when she calves again and her subsequent transition, so for the subsequent lactation, she will struggle again. She will get pregnant later again. And she gets into this vicious cycle that is really hard to break out of. That's why reproduction is important, not just for these older cows, but for all cows, for all lactating cows, because we don't even want our first lactation cows to get into this vicious cycle of delayed pregnancy, poorer health in the subsequent lactation, of course, health, production is poorer as well, and then just perpetuate this negative cycle of just poor performance for repro that leads to poor transition. So going back to some of the other factors, the larger uterus, so something that also makes a lot of sense and we know it, but even when you look within parity group, so when you look, of course, at the size of the uterus, it gets larger as cows get older. So a first lactation cow has a much smaller uterus than a second and a third lactation cow. And when you look at fertility of cows, it also follows the opposite trend, right? Where it's higher in first lactation cows, and then it goes down. But what is interesting is that when you look within the same parity group, when you look at first lactation cows and you look at second and greater lactation cows as a group, there is still an association between size of the uterus and the probability of pregnancy, which is clearly observed in this downward trend for pregnancies per AI at first insemination and uterine volume. So these cows that have larger and larger uterus, they struggle to get pregnant, at least for first insemination, early lactation. So another factor that is not that easy to control, of course, there are not a lot of solutions that we have today, probably other than selecting for cows that have a smaller uterus. And then the other factor that I mentioned as well, which is something that we cannot get away from, right? Most herds do want to have higher milk production. The trend for cows is for greater and greater milk production over time through all the great things that farms are doing, plus genetic selection. However, and unfortunately, there is a negative association between the ability of cows to show estrus, to show heat, and certain characteristics or features of those heats that cows show. In particular, duration of estrus. So there is almost a linear association between milk and duration of estrus, where cows that make less milk, they have longer heats than cows that make more milk. And again, as we continue to increase overall milk production in our herds, and we have more and more cows that will start, being in these groups of cows, right? In the cows that make more milk, then, we have this antagonism between the ability of cows to show estrus and then duration of estrus and milk production. And this has been explained a long time ago now. I mean, it's not a secret, and it's not too difficult to understand. And it's mostly related to the fact that for a cow, as you know really well, to make a lot of milk, she has to eat a lot. When a cow eats a lot, just like us, when we eat a lot, all the blood goes to the GI tract. And as it runs through the liver of the cow, where the hormones that are responsible for estrus expression and for good fertility, those hormones are metabolized. They are cleared out faster than in low-producing cows, and that results in these reduced circulating concentrations of these hormones that affects, again, estrus expression and fertility of these cows. So that's the biological association for those that are curious about why milk production is associated with poorer estrus expression and reduced duration of estrus. Very good. Now, let's start thinking. And I apologize, I kind of went fast through all of that. I mean, it's something that we could spend the entire talk or a whole day talking about. It's actually kind of fun, I mean, to understand these things, but I think that it's more important to focus on the potential solutions. And if there's one take-home message that I want to leave you with today is that, in my opinion, and you could have a different opinion, of course, there's no single strategy to improve the performance of older cows. I cannot tell you just go back to the farm and do this one thing because you're gonna just, get these cows to do a whole lot better. So I think that to improve repro performance of these cows, we need many adjustments. So we have to, adjust several aspects of reproductive management. And I like to think about it like a holistic approach. So, we just have to think about all the multiple factors that affect reproductive performance of our cows. And based on that, we can then start making those adjustments. And I'll divide them in two major groups or categories. First, I'm going to emphasize the importance of minimizing the occurrence and impact of risk factors for poor repro performance. What am I talking about? Health issues in early lactation, body condition, excessive body condition losses, all these things that, together, they reduce the ability of cows to get pregnant. And as you can see here, so I say this is a win-win thing, right? Because if we do those things well, we're going to improve repro, but we'll also improve milk. We're going to improve survivability. We're going to improve overall health, everything, right? So, these are things that every farmer wants to do, of course, and it will have a pretty substantial effect on repro. And then I'll make the case for prioritizing. So for farms to consider prioritizing reproductive management of multiparous cows, of older cows. So I think that we have to see these older cows as, the most fragile group. I mean, the group that we, if we want to spend time and money and effort overall, I think that should be our target group, because not only they are the ones that do poorer in general, but the first lactation cows, they tend to do really well. And in particular, in recent years, we have seen the first lactation cows do fantastic. And then above all these comments and these potential strategies, the devil is in the details, okay? So it's about the details. It's about the multiple things that we do to ensure that cows get pregnant when they should, okay? Again, so I cannot emphasize enough the fact that there are many factors. And in many cases, it's not gonna be like dramatic changes. It's not gonna be super different types of management that, or strategies I wanna use. In some cases, of course, I mean, it's very, very farm dependent, but for the most part, it's the details. So, general concept. So when we want to think, how do we improve repro performance? We need to improve the ability of these cows to show estrus or heats. We want to have a healthy uterus. We want to make sure that these cows ovulate the healthiest egg, the healthiest oocyte possible, and that from that follicle we'll also get the best CL, the best corpus luteum possible to sustain a pregnancy. And then if we get these cows pregnant, we want to try to promote pregnancy maintenance. We want to minimize pregnancy losses as much as possible. And of course, that's one of the trickiest things to do. But we have some things that we have learned in recent years that can help. And I cannot even see the audience today or ask the audience, what background do you have? I mean, if you come from large herds, small herds, but I'm sure that there's probably a variety of people that either come from or work with a whole array, whole range of herds in terms of size and the things that they can or cannot do. So I'll also make the case throughout my series of strategies that there are some individual cow solutions that we can implement, and there are also some whole herd solutions. And of course, sometimes they intertwine, but in my experience, it's always, I always have the question that, the farmer or whoever it is that is interested, how do I get this cow pregnant, or this small group of cows pregnant that I'm struggling with? That's what I mean by individual cows or smaller groups versus some of the more, larger herd, large herd solutions that we need. So keep this in mind. I'll try to emphasize some of these things. Let's start with minimizing the occurrence and impact of risk factors for poor repro performance. And I'm going to be very brief with these ones as well, because again, so most of what we can do has little to none to do with reproduction. How do we eliminate or minimize the impact of health on repro? Just don't let cows get sick, right? It's that simple. I mean, simple to say, hard to do, of course. So prevention, management. So again, big topic. We're not going to solve that now, but the fewer cows we have with health issues in early lactation or through lactation, the more we're going to benefit cows. For a more nutritional, metabolic perspective in general, minimizing BCS losses post-calving. It can even be more relevant than the actual body condition of cows at certain critical time points during lactation. So here I have kind of like the curve of body condition score and some of the target values. And I'm not going to revise this. I actually highlight in here body condition score at calving and body condition score at the lowest point, what we usually call the nadir, the lowest point for body condition. And we have to try to manage for the minimum loss, and ideally, for sure, less than 1 point loss in body condition. But it's really hard to manage that. So, some farms are able to do it. Some farms can manage, half a point, 0.75. That's actually ideal, but it all depends on a lot of things that we can do. Why body condition is strongly associated with the ability of cows to get pregnant. And here, again, I don't mean to revise this data. This is known. Everybody knows this. Cows that are in better body condition around the time of breeding, they have higher fertility. They are more fertile than cows that have low body condition score. And the other data I don't have in here is, again, is the loss. There is data out there showing that, even when you look at cows, when you look at them, regardless of the body condition that they have around breeding, if you separate them based on how much they have lost, that has the greatest impact. And cows that lose more than 0.75, 1 point of body condition, those are the big strugglers with getting pregnant. So I'm sure there are some nutritionists here in this talk today, or you guys talk to your nutritionist. So these are the kind of things that we can do. Pushing things a little more towards, some of the research that has been done in recent years, trying to improve repro performance of older cows in particular, and more of whole herd nutritional strategies. There has been some research done on, you can call it precision feeding. In this case, it's going to be with amino acids, with methionine. There was some interesting, kind of like encouraging data out there that was generated at UW-Madison by my former mentor, Dr. Wilbank, on the potential to reduce pregnancy losses in older cows, so in multiparous cows, through feeding them with methionine through early lactation and early pregnancy. So collaborating with Milo, we did a relatively large study, probably the largest study done so far, looking at feeding. And we fed cows methionine pretty much from 3-4 weeks pre-calving all the way to mid-lactation. And we had the goal of reducing pregnancy losses. I'm not going to bore you with this. And I just, I have no time to discuss this in detail. So please take this with a grain of salt. There are a lot of things to think about. The level of methionine that the control cows were getting versus the treated group. There are some aspects of this that are a little bit complicated. And I'm not going to bore you with all this data. I just want you to know that we have looked at 25, 30 different outcomes, repro outcomes, trying to see if we found any positive effects. And the most important one to us was pregnancy loss and fertility at first insemination. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem, again, that, with these high producing, really well managed cows under no no major environmental stresses, and these were 2 university herds. It doesn't seem like feeding them additional. So rumen-protected methionine helps a lot with getting them pregnant and with pregnancy loss. We observe, like it's very well known in the literature, a milk protein and fat response. So these cows make more protein in milk, they make more fat, and that is very well known. However, it doesn't seem like it will help repro. And one of our thoughts or a hypothesis is that it may be that the amount of methionine that cows need or can use to keep improving production responses is different to what they need for reproduction, right? So it may be that with a lot less methionine, the pregnancy will be okay, the uterus, so anything that is needed, everything that is needed to get cows pregnant and reduce pregnancy losses, it's optimized with a lot lower levels of methionine feeding, or again, that methionine feeding may be a little more beneficial to cows that are under more stressful conditions or more poorly managed than cows that were part of our study. So anyway, just to give you at least an idea and to let you know too that we are looking for, as you will see now when I start talking about hormonal treatments, time AI, things like that, it's not that we look at those things or we recommend those things because it's the only thing that we care about. We want to improve fertility of cows in any way possible that is feasible for farms. It's just that some that may seem promising, sometimes they just don't pan out. Now, the next concept or idea, let's try to prioritize repro management of our older cows. And as you know, we have two main ways to get cows bred. So we're going to either breed them in heat, so we're going to wait for cows to show heat and breed them, or we're going to synchronize them with time AI programs and try to get them pregnant. So I'm going to discuss these two in a little bit of isolation, although sometimes it's hard to separate them. The point is that there are some things that are a little more specific to each one. And I'm going to start with Estrus Expression. So, we know, again, that many biological and environmental factors affect the expression of estrus in older cows. They are less likely to show heats, those heats are less intense, and they are shorter. So it's always good to think about, so if this is the case, what are the factors that are driving this reality that we have with older cows? And I like to make the argument that we have cow factors and we have environmental and management factors. And we talked about this already. Previous health issues or issues that cows are undergoing now, they will all be detrimental for estrus expression, poor metabolic and nutritional status, lameness. You guys just had a talk on lameness. It's fundamental, right? I mean, healthy feet, cows with sore feet, they're not gonna be mounting other cows or even let another 1,800-pound cow mount her when she has sore feet, and any of her feet, not only her rear feet, right? And then one aspect that, we are learning more and more, and it's quite interesting, and it's genetic merit for fertility and the association between genetic merit for fertility and the ability of cows to show estrus. And hopefully I'll have the time to discuss that. But just, in a nutshell, it seems like selecting cows for fertility, for some of the fertility traits that we have, it's associated, or we will see phenotypes with cows that are more likely to show estrus and show better estrus. So we're going to get back to that later. Environmental and management factors, heat stress, it's a major culprit for estrus expression. So when we go into summer, we're going to do everything we can to minimize the effects of heat stress on our older cows. Fooding, and here again, related to food health, harder, slippery, abrasive flooring will all be detrimental to estrus expression. So we need to minimize these issues so cows feel comfortable showing heats. And excessive overcrowding will also be bad. You know, we need cows to have space to increase their physical activity, to interact with each other, form the sexually active groups, and do the things that they need to do to show estrus. So if we have one cow on top of each other that they cannot express heat, that's not going to help at all. Does it matter if cows show estrus? Of course, it matters just to breed them after the voluntary waiting period. But even if they show estrus before the end of the voluntary waiting period, from calving, before the end of the voluntary waiting period, there are some long-term consequences. And the more cows we have to show heats early in lactation, the better we will do. And this is just some data, very simple to understand. Cows that did or did not show heat before the end of the voluntary waiting period, and it's about half and half for the study that we are still running. But cows that show heat before, when you look at them after and whether or not they were bringing heat, 87% versus 51% of the cows that didn't show heat. And very importantly, when you look at their fertility to that first breeding, 44% for the ones that show heat versus 36%, and 8 percentage point numerical, you know, we haven't compared this statistically yet, numerical difference in favor of the group that shows heat. So it does matter, and it matters even when we are not breeding cows. So getting those cows to show heat early through improving all these environmental and management factors, as well as cow factors, will all be positive to improve reaper performance. Now, a few more management things to think about. Prioritize older cows for heat detection. Spend more time with them. So when we go to pens of cows, if they are, you know, if they are not commingled with first lactation, have people spend a little more time with the older cows. Use one or more estrus detection aids. Prioritize the older cows for using aids. And of course, these older cows, as I mentioned, they need more space and better conditions to express estrus. A few words about estrus detection. Everybody knows we have tons of ways of doing it, from the old visual observation to automated heat detection. So again, if we use visual as the primary means of heat detection, let's combine it with some aids that can help us catch some of the cows that we're not going to catch when we are not watching. And in this regard, I think this when automated heat detection systems can help us quite a bit, you know, especially in farms that struggle with heat detection. So I think that there is an opportunity in particular for older cows. So again, older cows, you know, have all these issues with heat expression and they show shorter heats. So these technologies may offer us some opportunity. So if we are trying to detect heats visually and we don't have the time to spend with these cows as much as we can, then, you know, we may want to have another set of eyes 24/7, and those set of eyes could be some of the systems. So some of the potential benefits of these technologies include the fact that they are always watching our cows. They are watching our cows always the same way. And of course, then there are some, you know, potential benefits with labor, right? So anyway, it's not going to be, so for farms that are doing well with visual observation, again, maybe, or some of the other methods, it's a matter, again, of just prioritizing the older cows. And for farms that are not doing as well, you know, if prioritizing older cows is not enough or it's just not possible, they may want to think about some of these technologies. So again, you know, I think that we have some opportunities with heat detection for older cows. I will jump in now to Time AI. So what are some of the things that we can do with Time AI to improve fertility of cows, okay? So in this case, when I say, well, you know, we're not even going to try with heat detection because we're not gonna do well, or we prefer to use Time AI. So we can be more aggressive and use a whole lot more time AI, both for first and for second and subsequent breedings. We can tweak the protocols that we have in place to improve the fertility of time AI breedings. So some of the things that we can do are, for example, giving 2 prostaglandins, so 2 prostaglandin treatments instead of 1 that has been the traditional way of doing it before time AI, giving cows larger doses of some of the key hormonal treatments, and this could be the GnRH injection, especially the first GnRH injection of Obscene protocols, and then progesterone supplementation. So for farms that do use, and here I put the pictures of the individual cows versus the whole herd. It depends a lot on how much they can or they cannot do with some of these treatments. But for example, giving 2 seeders to a cow instead of a single seeder has been shown to improve the fertility of these older cows without CLs that probably make a lot of milk. So we do have some alternatives. We have some ways of doing this, and we can talk about now during the Q&A session. And I just have to say, very important to always consult with your veterinarian for label use and make sure that there is proper supervision from a veterinarian before any of these changes are made. So, and then for the use of time AI, so I want to make the case that time AI programs that use, so using 100% time AI for first insemination, will be a potential way to improve fertility of these cows. So these programs give us really good control of timing of first service. And this is what you can see in this graph. I mean, farms totally control when these cows are inseminated. And we know that these fertility programs that we call fertility programs that are double Obscene, pre-sync Obscene, G6G, they lead to really, really good fertility, right? So, we have conception rates in the 50% range, even, for these older cows, that are making a lot of milk and may have gone through some of these issues early in lactation. So, these cows tend to do really well with this type of programs. And, we have a lot of farms that are using them, that are having a really, really great experience with this type of programs. Okay, so time AI, and I will be happy to expand a little bit more on this in a moment. I'll just, very briefly touch on some of the longer term herd, management things that we can do. And I just want to point out very quickly to basically what we have seen recently, and where I think that there is a window of opportunity here, more like long term, and it has to do with genetic merit for fertility and the ability of farms to select for fertility today using some of the fertility traits like DPR or any of the other ones that are associated with fertility. And in some of the recent research trials that we have been doing, we have seen, for example, that high genetic merit cows, they are more likely to show heat for first breeding. They are also more likely to get pregnant at first insemination, and no matter if they were bred through time AI, if they were bred with heat detection, they just are much better at getting pregnant. And you can see the trend from high to low fertility. These high fertility cows do a lot better. Now, of course, with genetic selection for fertility, you always have to keep in mind and balance the potential negative association with milk, right? Which is real. We know about it. Of course, there are opportunities by selecting cows that are better for fertility and are better at making milk, but that negative correlation cannot be forgotten, right? But anyway, so it's one thing to think about in the longer term, if we don't want to, emphasize so much the use of time AI or some of the other alternatives that we have. Of course, it's not a solution for tomorrow, But today, when you look at cows that have different genetic merit for fertility, you see that they are different. And maybe if you guys are reading the slide, I mean, you can see that this data says here for primiparous cows. That's just because of the research that we have done. But, you know, you can assume that, you know, as cows get older, there are still differences between cows of different genetic merit for fertility. So in the interest of time, I'll jump into to the highlights, and we can talk about some of these things in more detail. Again, we know that older cows have reduced repro performance, and that getting them pregnant earlier, it's good for them. It reduces their chances of calling, it makes them better at repro, making more milk and more profitable. We can do that in part by minimizing the risk factors that affect repro performance, but we do have management tools. We do have management tools that we can use the success of these cows, like minimizing days to breeding after the end of the voluntary weaning period with more aggressive time AI programs, or even combined programs. I want to say a few things during the Q&A session about that. It's not that I'm saying that time AI is the only solution, but it's one potential solution. And then, you know, trying to maximize the chances of pregnancy of these cows at first insemination with some hormonal or non-hormonal strategies. And of course, always think of long-term, you know, solutions, in this case, through genetics as a potential way of doing things better, doing better over time for these cows. With that, I would like to first acknowledge all the people and institutions that make my research possible. Lots of people, you know, help me present this type of data and recommendations. So I'm very grateful to all of them, and also even to commercial dairy farms that help us a lot with our research. With that, I also thank you, and I will be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, Julio, can you hear me?
Yes, Dave.
Yes. Wow. You've covered a lot of ground. There's a lot of things to think about. So there's no such thing as I thought maybe by now, since you've been at Cornell for what'd you say, 8 years, you would have come up with a some kind of an injection or a pill that we could give to these older cows to turn them back into virgin heifers, but I guess that's not possible.
I wish, Dave, but yeah, absolutely no. There's no silver bullet, right? So it's a combination of things.
Yeah, I do like some of your thoughts and ideas as far as the timed AI, and sounds like a lot of those ideas can be promising. We got one question here that's come in. It says, I heard at a different talk that GnRH can suppress natural heat. Is this true? Okay.
So yes, but it depends, right? So yes, depending on when you give the GnRH treatment. So if you're going to give GnRH to a cow that is about to show a heat, yes, that cow is very likely to go on to ovulate and therefore not show heat. And if you're giving those cows GnRH, probably because they are on a time AI program, they are starting a time AI program, then, I mean, that cow is going to end up showing a heat. And in fact, yeah, probably they could have even heard me say that, because, you know, we have designed programs to avoid the use of GnRH at the time when cows are most likely to show a heat, and you know, still be able to time AI these cows, but don't bother the ones that are about to show heat. So yes, there is an association, but it's very short term. I wanted to make that very clear. I hope that the concept is not that when you give one time or multiple times GnRH to a cow, she will not show a heat again. It's for a cow that is about to show heat within the next, you know, couple of days, or this day or today, and you give that cow a shot of GnRH, yes, and it's something natural. There's nothing wrong with the GnRH. It's doing what it's supposed to do, that is make the cow ovulate. And when the GnRH triggers ovulation, you know, estrogen goes away, and then there's no more estrogen for the cow to express heat.
So that for that particular cow that happens to be in that that part in time and recycle, it's a one-time event really as far as the impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to make sure that that is absolutely clear. And I do get this question, you know, some people are concerned with repetitive use of hormonal treatments. There is absolutely no evidence, okay? There is no evidence that they are detrimental. And if anything, we have lots of evidence that they help cows get pregnant, that they can help them be more likely to show heats. So, you know, again, not because I work a lot with synchronization, but again, there's absolutely no evidence that they are detrimental in the long term. And probably the best thing that farms can do, you know, when they fail with heat detection, is to put these cows in some sort of time-AI treatment to help them get pregnant and have a subsequent lactation.
Okay, so here's another question. Can you expand on the consequences of early lactation ketosis has on fertility?
So yeah, that's a good question. Thank you. And I think so. It's very, very specific. I mean, the effect of ketosis. I'll say that you know, it's not fully understood. I mean, we don't know 100% why cows with ketosis are going to have reduced fertility. It is somewhat likely that it's because a lot of the cows that have ketosis also have other issues. You know, they have, you know, a uterus that is not as healthy, so they may have metritis. You know, if they had ketosis, maybe they are going to lose a lot more body condition score. So there are several factors. Now, if you see clinical ketosis or even severe subclinical ketosis as a condition that it's basically the outcome of cows mobilizing a lot of fat, right? So cows with ketosis usually are cows that are moving a lot of their fat from their fat storage. And there is some evidence that when cows mobilize a lot of fat in early lactation, and this is related actually to what I said about extreme body condition losses, a lot of those fatty acids can go to the egg, to the oocyte on the ovary, and they accumulate on the oocyte. And then when those oocytes, when those eggs ovulate, they have lower fertility. So they have less ability, less capacity to become an embryo. So there is an association, of course, that has been shown mostly in vitro studies that they give, you know, they put in a plate a lot of eggs and they put a lot of fat or, you know, blood from cows that are mobilizing a lot of fatty acids. And they see that those eggs take up a lot of those fatty acids. And then when they fertilize them, then those don't develop into embryos at the same rate as the ones that don't see as much fat. So that will probably be my best explanation. And again, it's multifactorial. There's not a single thing, but there's some of that biology.
Okay, very good. So I've got a question for you, and it's a little bit it's a little bit different maybe than your typical repro question that you might get. I've got a few large dairies that I work with that feel that pressure from the public is going to cause them to lose the ability to synchronize cows in the future. And they are putting a lot of emphasis in their genetic program on fertility because they think that's going to benefit them in the future if and when these tools in their toolbox go away. That's, nobody knows that for sure, but what are your thoughts? So this is, like I said, this is certainly different than the kind of questions you've gotten so far here, but what do you think?
You know, it's different, but I get that question all the time. Just let me say that I do not know what is going to happen. Of course, I just hope that it never happens. Okay. But, you know, so far, I mean, it's been always just, you know, things that people worry about. There's nothing concrete out there. Now, to the question of genetics, so I kind of went fast through this, so I'm putting my slide back in here and I'll show you another slide that I have on my deck. You know, I was even a little bit skeptical of this concept that, I mean, if you were to look at genetic merit for fertility of cows in your herd today, that you would see differences in fertility or reproductive performance overall. And, you know, that's because the heritability of fertility traits is very, very low, right? It's less than 5%. So I was a little bit skeptical, but these are results of research that we have done in 6 farms across New York State. And we basically look at the performance of cows of different genetic merit for fertility. And you see here, we use DPR and we look at the probability of cows to show heat. And then we divide them in fertility groups, high, medium, low, and we look at their first service conception rates. And there are differences, and they are statistically significant, and they are numerically important, right? So think, just to show you the example here, I mean, the low DPR cows, they had a 50% chance of being bred in heat on average, whereas the ones in the middle, and here it seems to be going down a little bit, but it's a little bit of an artifact of the data. But the higher fertility, higher DPR cows, they had 70% of them were bred in heat. So about a 20 percentage point spread in heat expression and detection. And look at this, 60% conception rate at first service versus 48, right? It's a 12 percentage point difference in first, and these are first lactation cows. Okay, so you have to expect that these first lactation cows, and there is some data actually showing that they carry over this different potential for fertility. And when we looked at the speed, the pregnancy rate during lactation, the high fertility cows, they got pregnant faster, and we got fewer open cows at the end of lactation. So it does make a difference. Now, I think that is fantastic. It's a great idea. I fully support it. But just like I said in my talk, do not forget. So just do some balanced selection, unless that your only interest is fertility, right? If all that you care about is fertility, fair game, just select for fertility only, right? And you will probably see the benefits in a few generations. Now, if you care about male production, do not forget about the negative association between male production and fertility. It is real. If I show you the male production from these cows in this experiment, the high fertility cows are the lower producing cows, okay? But you also have high fertility, high male production cows if you divide cows in quadrants. And those are probably the cows that farms should think about. So let's select for both. And of course, as you know, there are indexes like net merit or some of the other indexes out there that try to balance for fertility, for health, for profitability, right? So I do believe that long-term selection for improved fertility, it's important.
Okay, well, we are over on time here, and we kept going because there are a lot of good questions here, and I know some people have got to get going. So we've exhausted our questions here. So I guess we're gonna stop. I want to thank you very much, Julio, for coming on today and addressing this topic. Very important topic, and we don't get these cows pregnant, we don't get milk the next lactation. So very, very important. So anyway, as people sign off today, please fill out the questionnaire.